Have you ever heard of a king who was granted unparalleled wisdom, a gift directly from God, and who led his people to incredible heights of prosperity and peace, only to be brought down by his own weaknesses? This is the story of Solomon, a name that resonates through the ages as the wisest, wealthiest, and most revered king in biblical history. Solomon transformed the small kingdom of Israel into a flourishing center of wealth and influence, admired by neighboring nations and guided by a divine wisdom that few have ever matched. But despite his wisdom, Solomon had one flaw that ultimately led to his downfall: his overwhelming attraction to women. Solomon's journey began under the guidance of his father, King David, a figure remembered for his courage and faith, who overcame giants both on the battlefield and in his life. David's legacy was one of honor, resilience, and a profound connection with God. But his life was also marked by scandal. Solomon was born from the union of David and Bathsheba, a relationship initially tainted by betrayal and deception. David arranged for the death of Bathsheba's husband, Uriah, to cover their affair, a dark episode that left its mark on both their lives. In time, David repented, and God's mercy was shown through the birth of Solomon, whose name means peaceful. As Solomon grew, he carried not only the weight of his father's past but also the hopes of an entire kingdom. As a young prince, Solomon was guided by the prophet Nathan, a man of profound insight and wisdom who recognized in Solomon a potential for greatness. Nathan became more than a teacher. He was a mentor who shaped Solomon's understanding of faith, leadership, and justice. When David's health began to fail, Nathan and Bathsheba took steps to secure Solomon's place as heir to the throne, even though he was not David's eldest son. Their loyalty and ambition helped pave Solomon's path to kingship, solidifying his future as the ruler of Israel. When Solomon finally ascended to the throne, he faced a daunting task. The young king knew that his kingdom needed stability, and he took measures to eliminate any threats to his rule. With a resolve far beyond his years, Solomon ordered a purge of his enemies, ensuring that his authority would not be challenged. Those who opposed him, including powerful figures like Joab, David's former general, were swiftly removed. Through these actions, Solomon established himself as a decisive and determined ruler, willing to make hard choices to protect his throne and his people. But it wasn't through force alone that Solomon strengthened Israel. Recognizing the importance of alliances, Solomon married the daughter of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, forming a bond that brought stability and influence to his kingdom. This union was celebrated throughout Israel, a symbol of Solomon's wisdom and strategic vision. However, this marriage would also foreshadow Solomon's eventual weakness, a desire to form alliances with women from other nations. Each marriage, while politically advantageous, introduced foreign customs and beliefs into Israel, creating a tension between Solomon's loyalty to God and his duty as a king. One night, while Solomon lay asleep, he experienced a dream that would forever change his life. In this vision, God appeared to him and offered a choice. He could ask for anything he desired. Solomon, aware of the weight of his responsibility and the challenges he would face, made a humble request. He did not ask for wealth or a long life. Instead, he asked for wisdom to govern his people justly and to discern between right and wrong. His answer pleased God, who granted him a heart full of wisdom, unlike any before him or after. From that moment on, Solomon's wisdom became legendary. He resolved disputes with insight and compassion, and people traveled from far and wide to hear his judgments. One of the most famous stories tells of two women who came to him, each claiming to be the mother of the same child. In a moment of brilliance, Solomon proposed to divide the child between them, knowing that the true mother would rather give up her child than see it harmed. His wisdom in this case astonished the people of Israel, confirming that God's hand was upon him. Solomon's early reign brought an era of unprecedented prosperity to Israel. He built alliances, increased trade, and filled the kingdom's coffers with wealth. Yet, alongside this prosperity, a weakness began to grow in Solomon's heart, a vulnerability that would eventually lead to his undoing. Solomon had a profound admiration for beauty and culture, especially in the form of the many women he married. Over time, his palace became home to 700 wives and 300 concubines, each representing different nations and traditions. This harem was more than just a symbol of his power. It was a network of political alliances and peace treaties, each marriage solidifying bonds with foreign lands. But these unions came with a price. With each new wife, foreign customs and religions began to infiltrate the heart of Israel. Solomon allowed temples and altars to be built for foreign gods, a direct challenge to the faith of his people. Statues of gods like Ashtoreth and Baal appeared on the hills surrounding Jerusalem, and practices that were once foreign became more accepted among the people. Slowly, Solomon's devotion to God wavered as he sought to please his wives and honor the cultures they brought with them. As we continue, we'll delve deeper into Solomon's remarkable story, exploring how he rose to incredible heights and the choices that led to his tragic fall. Join us as we uncover the legacy of wisdom, wealth, and weakness that shaped Solomon's life and left an indelible mark on history. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, so you won't miss the next chapter in this compelling story. In the ancient city of Jerusalem, around the year 990 BC, a new prince was born who would eventually become one of the most remarkable figures in Israel's history. His name was Solomon, meaning peaceful or friend of God. His arrival was filled with hope and purpose, yet his story began under a shadow of scandal and regret. Solomon's parents, King David and Bathsheba, shared a complex relationship that began in secret and was marred by betrayal. Bathsheba had been the wife of Uriah the Hittite, a loyal soldier in David's army. King David, captivated by her beauty, orchestrated Uriah's death in battle to hide his own indiscretion with Bathsheba, a decision that would haunt him. The union of David and Bathsheba was originally tainted by their sins, and God's judgment soon followed. The first child they had together did not survive, and this loss weighed heavily on both David and Bathsheba. However, in his mercy, God allowed them a second chance, and from this reconciliation, Solomon was born. His birth was seen as a sign of divine forgiveness, a reminder of God's grace amidst human flaws. Solomon grew up surrounded by tales of his father's bravery and his family's faith, but he was also aware of the gravity of his father's mistakes. From a young age, Solomon's life was intertwined with the teachings of the prophet Nathan. Nathan had been a loyal advisor to David and had spoken out against the king's sins when no one else dared. This same prophet took a special interest in Solomon, seeing in him a potential for greatness that could carry David's legacy forward. Nathan's wisdom, discipline, and vision shaped Solomon's mind and spirit, guiding him towards a deeper understanding of justice, faith, and the responsibilities that came with his heritage. As Solomon grew older, Nathan began to see an extraordinary destiny for the young prince. However, the path to the throne was not without its challenges. Solomon was not David's only son, and older brothers might naturally lay claim to kingship. In particular, Adonijah, one of David's other sons, saw himself as the rightful heir and began to gather supporters who would help him assume power. But Nathan and Bathsheba, understanding the importance of Solomon's potential and believing in his destiny, worked together to secure his place on the throne. Through private discussions with David, they convinced him that Solomon was chosen by God to rule over Israel, paving the way for Solomon's eventual rise to power. When David's health began to fail, the tension in the palace grew. Adonijah moved quickly, attempting to seize power before his father's passing. In a decisive moment, Bathsheba and Nathan intervened, reminding David of his promise that Solomon would inherit the throne. David, frail but resolute, gathered his remaining strength and publicly proclaimed Solomon as his successor, solidifying his position as the next king of Israel. This marked the beginning of Solomon's reign, though he was still young and inexperienced, just 15 years old when he took on the enormous responsibility of leading a nation. Despite his youth, Solomon took immediate steps to secure his rule. David, on his deathbed, warned Solomon of potential threats within the kingdom and advised him to act wisely to eliminate those who might conspire against him. Solomon heeded his father's advice, embarking on a campaign to consolidate his power. One of his first actions was to deal with Joab, David's former general who had supported Adonijah's bid for the throne. Joab, a seasoned warrior, was both respected and feared, but Solomon knew that allowing him to remain could jeopardize his reign. With a determination that surprised many, Solomon ordered Joab's execution, sending a clear message that he was a king who would not tolerate betrayal. In addition to Joab, Solomon addressed other potential threats, including Adonijah himself. Though Adonijah initially sought forgiveness and pledged loyalty to Solomon, he continued to pose a risk. Solomon, aware of his brother's ambition, made the difficult decision to have Adonijah removed, eliminating any chance of future rebellion. Through these actions, Solomon demonstrated his willingness to make hard decisions in the interest of stability, proving that he was prepared to defend his throne against any challenge. With his kingdom now secure, Solomon turned his attention to building alliances that would ensure lasting peace and prosperity for Israel. One of his first and most significant moves was to forge a bond with Egypt, a powerful neighboring kingdom. By marrying the pharaoh's daughter, Solomon cemented an alliance that would provide security and open avenues for trade. This union was celebrated throughout Israel, symbolizing a new era of strength and stability. Solomon's marriage to the Egyptian princess was a strategic masterstroke, one that set the stage for an era of unprecedented prosperity. However, this decision also marked the beginning of a pattern that would come to define Solomon's life. His marriage to the daughter of Pharaoh was not only a political alliance but also a doorway to foreign customs and influences. The Egyptian princess brought with her the traditions of her homeland, including religious beliefs that were foreign to the Israelites. Solomon, eager to honor his new queen, allowed her to maintain these practices, even building shrines and altars to accommodate her faith. This tolerance, while politically advantageous, sowed the seeds of a struggle that would eventually challenge Solomon's loyalty to the God of Israel. Yet in these early years, Solomon's reign was marked by prosperity and growth. His wisdom, a gift from God, guided him as he strengthened Israel's economy, built alliances, and established a period of peace that allowed his people to thrive. Solomon's kingdom flourished, and his reputation as a wise and just ruler began to spread beyond Israel's borders, drawing attention from neighboring nations. Leaders from distant lands came to seek his counsel, marveling at the young king who had transformed Israel into a land of abundance and order. But as Solomon's power and influence grew, so did his desire for more alliances, each secured through marriage to a princess from a foreign land. The palace became a vast network of relationships, with each new wife representing a different nation and culture. These unions were beneficial for the kingdom, bringing peace and prosperity, yet they also introduced a variety of beliefs and customs that conflicted with the teachings of the God of Israel. Solomon's growing harem of foreign wives became a source of both strength and vulnerability, reflecting the complex nature of his rule. As we delve further into Solomon's story, we will see how his early decisions, made with the intention of securing peace and stability, eventually led him down a path of compromise and conflict. His wisdom and ambition brought Israel to the height of its power, but his heart was gradually drawn away from the pure faith of his people. Join us as we continue to explore the life of Solomon, a king whose rise and fall offer profound lessons about the balance of power, faith, and the human heart. Solomon's early reign was blessed with prosperity and divine favor, yet one night, as he lay asleep, he experienced a life-changing dream. In this dream, God appeared to him with an incredible offer: "Ask for whatever you want me to give you." Solomon, aware of the immense responsibility resting on his shoulders, could have asked for wealth, long life, or victory over his enemies. Instead, he responded humbly, saying, "Give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and to distinguish between right and wrong." This request pleased God greatly, as Solomon sought wisdom not for his own gain, but to serve his people justly. In return, God granted him a heart of unparalleled wisdom, promising that there would never be another like him. Along with this wisdom, God also granted him riches and honor, blessings beyond measure. Upon awakening, Solomon felt a profound sense of purpose and gratitude. This divine gift of wisdom became the defining feature of his reign, guiding his decisions and cementing his reputation as a ruler unlike any other. Solomon's wisdom was soon put to the test in a case that would solidify his legacy for generations to come. Two women came before him, each claiming to be the mother of the same infant. The situation was tense, as both women passionately defended their right to the child, and it was unclear who was telling the truth. The fate of the child lay in Solomon's hands, and those present watched closely to see how he would handle this delicate matter. In a surprising turn, Solomon called for a sword and proposed a shocking solution: cut the living child in two and give half to one and half to the other. His words sent a ripple of shock through the courtroom, leaving everyone breathless. But Solomon's wisdom was at work. He knew that the true mother would reveal herself. As he expected, one woman cried out, "Please, my lord, give her the living child. Do not kill him." Her plea, filled with selfless love, exposed her as the true mother, while the other woman, with a hardened heart, agreed to divide the child. Solomon immediately ordered the child be given to the woman who showed compassion, declaring her to be the true mother. This judgment spread rapidly throughout Israel, a testament to the wisdom God had granted him. This remarkable display of Solomon's insight set the tone for his reign, and people from distant lands began to hear of the young king's wisdom. Envoys, merchants, and foreign rulers traveled to Israel, drawn by stories of Solomon's legendary judgments and the prosperity of his kingdom. Through his discernment and sense of justice, Solomon's influence reached far beyond Israel's borders, creating alliances and earning admiration from neighboring nations. His wisdom attracted scholars, traders, and diplomats, all eager to learn from his understanding and witness the wealth of his kingdom firsthand. Solomon's wisdom was not limited to legal judgments. It extended into every aspect of life. He became known as a scholar and poet, penning proverbs and songs that revealed deep insights into human nature, spirituality, and the world around him. His writings, many of which are preserved in the Book of Proverbs, offered guidance on how to live a life of integrity, wisdom, and devotion to God. His words reflected a profound understanding of both human weaknesses and the path to a righteous life. Proverbs such as, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction," became cornerstones of his teachings, inspiring generations to seek wisdom and live with humility. Solomon's wisdom also manifested in his understanding of nature and science. He studied the animals, plants, and natural wonders of his land, accumulating knowledge that rivaled that of the great scholars of his time. He spoke of trees, from the cedars of Lebanon to the hyssop that grows out of walls, of animals, birds, and fish, observing and recording their behaviors. His curiosity and respect for God's creation enriched his kingdom, turning Israel into a center of knowledge and cultural exchange. People from all over the ancient world sought his wisdom, and his kingdom became renowned not just for its wealth, but for its intellectual and spiritual contributions. Under Solomon's guidance, Israel's wealth grew exponentially. He established trade routes that connected Israel with Egypt, Arabia, and distant lands, bringing in gold, spices, and luxury goods that filled the royal treasury. The kingdom's prosperity was reflected in the splendor of his court, where gold and precious stones adorned everything from his throne to the drinking vessels. The Bible recounts that in Solomon's time, silver was so common that it was considered of little value, a sign of the abundance that marked his reign. Solomon's court was a place of great beauty and elegance, a fitting reflection of his wisdom and the blessings God had bestowed upon him. His throne, an impressive structure of ivory and gold, was a symbol of his authority and the wealth of his kingdom. Lions stood beside each armrest, and 12 lions lined the steps, a display of majesty and strength that reminded visitors of Solomon's unparalleled reign. The palace itself was filled with riches from across the known world, and the people of Israel marveled at the prosperity their king had achieved. Yet as Solomon's wealth and influence grew, so did the complexity of his alliances. His marriages to foreign princesses expanded his kingdom's influence, creating bonds with Egypt, Moab, Ammon, and Sidon. Each marriage brought new resources, but also new challenges, as these alliances introduced foreign customs and gods into the heart of Israel. The Egyptian princess, adorned in the finest silks and jewels, was only the first of many wives, each from a different land, each with her own gods and traditions. Solomon's palace became a melting pot of cultures, a tapestry woven from the diverse beliefs and practices of his queens. These marriages served a dual purpose. They brought peace and stability to Israel, while also transforming the palace into a place of beauty and variety. Solomon's wives brought with them unique perspectives, enriching the court's culture and introducing Solomon to new ideas. Yet, These unions also sowed seeds of spiritual conflict. Foreign gods, statues, and altars began to appear within Jerusalem, challenging the strict monotheistic faith of the Israelites. Solomon's openness to these new customs, though politically savvy, posed a growing risk to his relationship with God and the faith of his people. As Solomon continued to seek wisdom and knowledge, he found himself torn between his loyalty to the God of Israel and his desire to honor the traditions of his wives. His heart, once fully devoted to God, began to drift as he struggled to balance his responsibilities as a ruler with his personal desires. This inner conflict would ultimately lead Solomon down a path that threatened the very foundation of his kingdom. In the next part of our journey, we'll explore how Solomon's ambition and wisdom led him to create one of the ancient world's most magnificent structures, the Temple in Jerusalem. But with each decision, he would face the challenge of staying true to his faith amidst the allure of wealth, power, and cultural influence. Don't miss the next chapter in this unfolding story of Solomon's life, a tale of wisdom, power, and the choices that would shape the destiny of a nation. As Solomon's kingdom flourished, he began planning a grand project that would become his crowning achievement, the construction of the Temple in Jerusalem. For generations, the Israelites had worshipped God at temporary altars or in portable structures, but Solomon envisioned a permanent house of worship dedicated to the Lord. This would not only unify the people in their faith, but also serve as a visible symbol of Israel's prosperity and dedication to God. The temple would be the centerpiece of Jerusalem, an architectural marvel that reflected the wealth and wisdom of Solomon's reign. However, this ambitious project required resources beyond what Israel alone could provide. Solomon knew he needed a skilled partner, and he found one in Hiram, the king of Tyre. Tyre was a wealthy city known for its skilled craftsmen, extensive trade networks, and abundant supplies of cedar and cypress wood, ideal materials for constructing a temple of grandeur. Solomon sent messengers to Hiram with a bold proposal, recounting how his father David had wished to build a temple but had been unable due to the constant wars surrounding Israel. Now that God had granted Israel peace, Solomon declared his intention to fulfill his father's dream and asked Hiram for his support. Hiram, recognizing Solomon's wisdom and vision, eagerly accepted the proposal. He pledged to supply cedar and cypress wood, along with the expertise of his finest craftsmen, who would help bring Solomon's vision to life. In return, Solomon agreed to provide Hiram with food and other goods, establishing a mutually beneficial trade relationship that strengthened both kingdoms. This alliance with Tyre not only secured the resources needed for the temple, but also marked the beginning of a friendship that would bring stability and wealth to Israel. With the materials and manpower in place, Solomon set about the task of constructing the temple, a project that would take 7 years to complete. The temple's design was grand and meticulous, following divine instructions that had been passed down through the generations. The building was to be 60 cubits long, 20 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high, a vast structure for its time, embodying the grandeur and reverence appropriate for a house of God. Every detail was carefully planned and executed, from the foundation stones to the intricate carvings that adorned the walls. The interior of the temple was even more impressive, with walls lined in cedar and overlaid with pure gold, creating an aura of splendor that reflected the holiness of the space. The sanctuary housed the Ark of the Covenant, a sacred chest that symbolized God's covenant with Israel. The Holy of Holies, the innermost chamber, was a place so revered that only the high priest could enter it, and only once a year. This sacred room was shielded by a magnificent veil, adding to the mystery and sanctity of the temple. Outside the temple, Solomon commissioned 2 massive bronze pillars, named Jachin and Boaz, which stood at the entrance and symbolized strength and stability. These pillars, along with the intricately decorated doors and lavish furnishings, made the temple a marvel of craftsmanship and devotion. The temple's courtyard was filled with various altars, lavers, and other instruments for worship, designed to accommodate the many rituals and sacrifices that were central to Israelite worship. When the temple was finally completed, Solomon gathered the people of Israel for a grand dedication ceremony. The Ark of the Covenant was brought into the temple with great reverence, and the priests and Levites led a procession filled with music, singing, and sacrifices. As the Ark was placed in the Holy of Holies, a cloud filled the temple, symbolizing God's presence among his people. Solomon, standing before the assembled crowd, offered a heartfelt prayer, asking God to bless the temple and to hear the prayers of all who would come to worship there. In his prayer, Solomon acknowledged God's greatness and the people's dependence on his mercy. He prayed for wisdom and justice, asking that God would listen to the prayers of his people, whether in times of peace or in times of trouble. Solomon's prayer reflected his deep understanding of God's power and his commitment to leading Israel in righteousness. As he finished, fire came down from heaven and consumed the offerings, a sign of God's approval of the temple and his continued presence among the Israelites. The dedication of the temple marked a turning point in Israel's history. The people had a permanent place to worship and honor God, a center of faith that would unite them and serve as a reminder of their covenant with the Lord. Solomon's temple became a beacon of spiritual strength and a testament to the blessings God had bestowed upon Israel. People from across the ancient world came to see the temple, marveling at its beauty and the wisdom of the king who had built it. The fame of Solomon's wisdom and the splendor of his kingdom spread far and wide, drawing visitors and admirers from distant lands. Among those who heard of Solomon's greatness was the Queen of Sheba, a powerful and wealthy ruler from a distant land. Intrigued by the stories of Solomon's wisdom and the glory of his kingdom, she embarked on a journey to Jerusalem, determined to see for herself if the tales were true. The Queen of Sheba arrived with an impressive entourage, bearing lavish gifts of gold, spices, and precious stones, a testament to her own wealth and influence. Her visit was more than a simple diplomatic gesture. She came with questions and challenges to test Solomon's wisdom. Solomon welcomed the Queen of Sheba with open arms, and they engaged in a series of conversations that revealed the depth of his understanding. The Queen posed difficult questions, touching on matters of faith, philosophy, and governance, but Solomon answered each with clarity and insight. The Queen of Sheba was astonished by his wisdom, declaring that not even half of his greatness had been told to her. She praised God for blessing Israel with such a wise and discerning ruler, recognizing that Solomon's wisdom was a gift from the divine. The Queen of Sheba's visit not only confirmed Solomon's reputation but also strengthened Israel's ties with foreign lands. Her gifts added to the wealth of the kingdom, and her admiration for Solomon's wisdom further enhanced his standing among the rulers of the ancient world. The exchange of ideas, culture, and goods between Solomon and the Queen of Sheba symbolized the peak of Israel's prosperity and influence, a time when Solomon's wisdom and the blessings of God brought honor and respect to the nation. As Solomon's reign continued, Israel reached an unprecedented level of wealth and power. Trade routes stretched across the known world, bringing in luxuries from Arabia, Africa, and beyond. The royal treasury overflowed with gold and silver, and Solomon's palace was a testament to the prosperity of his rule. His throne, crafted from ivory and gold, was unlike anything the world had seen, a symbol of his authority and the wealth that Israel had attained. But as Israel grew in wealth, so did Solomon's collection of wives and concubines. His marriages were not merely personal choices but political alliances, each one securing peace and trade with a different nation. Yet, with each new wife came new customs, traditions, and foreign gods. In our next chapter, we will delve into the consequences of Solomon's divided heart and the spiritual challenges that arose as foreign influences took root in Israel. As Solomon's reign progressed, his kingdom continued to grow in wealth and prestige, but so did the complexities of his alliances and personal life. Solomon's strategy of securing peace through marriage led to an unprecedented number of wives and concubines. 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines, each representing alliances with various nations. This approach initially strengthened Israel's diplomatic ties, as each marriage created new avenues for trade and military support. But with these alliances came not only foreign customs but also foreign gods, and gradually, Israel began to change in ways that threatened its spiritual core. Each of Solomon's wives brought with her the gods of her homeland, and as he sought to maintain peace within his palace, Solomon allowed his wives to worship their deities. Altars and shrines dedicated to these foreign gods began to appear throughout Israel, a stark contrast to the monotheistic faith that had defined the nation since the time of Abraham. The God of Israel, who had blessed Solomon with wisdom and wealth, now looked upon a land where idols to gods like Ashtoreth, Milcom, and Molech were becoming part of daily life. This shift was not just a cultural change. It was a spiritual conflict that began to affect the hearts of the people. At first, Solomon maintained his dedication to God, overseeing the temple worship and ensuring that sacrifices were made according to Israelite tradition. However, as time passed, his devotion began to waver. The influence of his foreign wives, coupled with his desire to please them, led him to build altars for their gods near Jerusalem. These places of worship stood in stark contrast to the temple Solomon had built for the God of Israel, and their presence represented a growing divide between Solomon's public devotion and his private compromises. One by one, these altars became focal points for the worship of foreign gods, drawing the people of Israel away from their faith. Solomon's choice to allow these practices introduced a kind of spiritual erosion, a slow but steady shift that would have lasting consequences. The people, once united in their worship of the one true God, began to adopt the rituals and sacrifices of their king's foreign wives, blending their faith with the customs of other nations. The impact was profound. A once unified and devout nation was now spiritually divided, its people increasingly drawn to beliefs and practices that conflicted with the teachings of their ancestors. Among the gods worshipped by Solomon's wives was Molech, a deity associated with practices that were detestable in the eyes of the Israelites. The rituals performed for Molech, which included human sacrifices, were deeply troubling and a clear violation of the laws that God had given to Moses. Yet, Solomon, caught between his love for his wives and his duty as a king, allowed these practices to persist. His decision to tolerate the worship of such gods marked a turning point in his relationship with God, who had blessed him with wisdom and riches beyond measure. God, seeing the growing idolatry in Israel and the changes within Solomon's heart, was deeply saddened and angered. The God who had appeared to Solomon in dreams, who had granted him wisdom and promised to bless his kingdom, now saw his chosen king turning away from the covenant. In a moment of divine revelation, God appeared to Solomon once more, warning him of the consequences of his actions. "Since this is your attitude and you have not kept my covenant and my decrees, I will most certainly tear the kingdom away from you and give it to one of your subordinates." This judgment echoed through Solomon's soul, a reminder that even the wisest of kings could fall if he turned away from God. Despite this warning, Solomon found it increasingly difficult to reverse the changes that had taken hold in Israel. His alliances, while beneficial in terms of peace and trade, had compromised the spiritual integrity of his kingdom. The people had grown accustomed to the presence of foreign gods, and many had even adopted these practices as part of their daily lives. The foundations of faith that had once united Israel were now fractured, and the kingdom was beginning to show signs of division and unrest. In addition to the internal strife, adversaries began to rise against Solomon from outside the kingdom. One such figure was Hadad the Edomite, a member of the royal family of Edom who had fled to Egypt after David's conquest of Edom. During Solomon's reign, Hadad returned to his homeland and began to challenge Israel's dominance, exploiting the weakening spiritual unity of the nation. This was a clear sign that Israel's prosperity and peace were at risk, a result of Solomon's divided heart and the compromises he had made. Another adversary arose in the form of Rezon, a former military commander who had escaped during one of David's campaigns. Rezon established himself in Damascus and began to harass Israel's northern borders, further destabilizing Solomon's rule. These enemies, emboldened by Israel's internal weaknesses, saw opportunities to challenge Solomon's authority, testing the strength of a kingdom that was no longer united in faith and purpose. But perhaps the greatest threat came from within Israel itself. Jeroboam, one of Solomon's officials, was approached by the prophet Ahijah, who delivered a message from God. Ahijah tore his cloak into 12 pieces and gave 10 to Jeroboam, symbolizing that God would divide the kingdom, giving 10 tribes to Jeroboam and leaving only a small portion for the house of David. Jeroboam, emboldened by the prophecy, began to rally support among the people, who were growing increasingly discontented with Solomon's rule. The once celebrated king, who had led Israel to the heights of prosperity, was now seeing his legacy threatened by the consequences of his choices. Solomon's wisdom and wealth, once symbols of God's favor, had become sources of envy and division. The people, burdened by the taxes and labor required to maintain. Solomon, aware of the growing unrest, attempted to maintain control, but his heart was troubled. He recognized the impact of his compromises and the pain they had caused his people, yet he found himself unable to restore the unity and devotion that had once defined Israel. In his later years, Solomon's reflections grew more somber, and he penned words that revealed his inner struggles and regrets. In the book of Ecclesiastes, he wrote, "Meaningless, meaningless. Everything is meaningless." These words echoed the emptiness he felt as he looked back on a life filled with both achievements and regrets. Through Ecclesiastes, Solomon offered wisdom born of experience, warning future generations of the futility of wealth, pleasure, and worldly pursuits without a foundation in God. His reflections revealed a man who had tasted the heights of power and the depths of disillusionment, a king who had learned that true fulfillment could not be found in earthly gains. As Solomon's life drew to a close, the kingdom he had built with such vision and effort stood on the brink of fracture. His son Rehoboam would inherit a divided and troubled nation, a legacy tainted by the consequences of Solomon's choices. The kingdom, once united in worship and purpose, was now a land of divided loyalties and conflicting beliefs, a reflection of the king's own divided heart. In our next chapter, we will explore the final days of Solomon's life and the lasting impact of his reign on the history of Israel. In the final days of Solomon's life, the once great king was a shadow of his former self. Though he was still revered for his wisdom and the wealth he had brought to Israel, his heart was weighed down by regret and spiritual weariness. The kingdom that had been united under his father, King David, now showed signs of fracture and unrest. Solomon had achieved remarkable feats. He had built a magnificent temple, established strong alliances, and elevated Israel to a position of prosperity that few could have imagined. Yet, he had also allowed foreign gods and influences to seep into the heart of Israel, weakening the spiritual foundation that had once united his people. As Solomon looked back on his life, he was painfully aware of how his pursuit of worldly pleasures had drawn him away from the God who had granted him wisdom. He had amassed incredible wealth, married hundreds of women from foreign lands, and built a palace that rivaled the splendor of the temple. But despite all of these achievements, a profound emptiness had settled over his soul. In his writings, Solomon expressed this inner turmoil with haunting clarity. In the book of Ecclesiastes, he wrote, "I have seen all the things that are done under the sun. All of them are meaningless, a chasing after the wind." These words were a somber reflection on the futility of a life focused solely on earthly desires and ambitions. The wisdom that had once brought Solomon joy and fulfillment now served as a reminder of how far he had strayed from his faith. In Ecclesiastes, he shared insights gained from a lifetime of success and failure, urging his readers to seek meaning in God rather than in material wealth or human achievements. "Fear God and keep his commandments," he concluded, "for this is the duty of all mankind." These words, filled with the weight of experience, were Solomon's way of cautioning future generations to avoid the mistakes he had made. His writings became a legacy of wisdom, a lasting testament to the lessons he had learned in both his triumphs and his failures. As Solomon's health declined, so did the stability of his kingdom. The people were burdened by the heavy taxes and labor that had been required to build his grand projects, and discontent began to grow among the tribes of Israel. Many felt that Solomon had lost touch with the struggles of ordinary people, focusing instead on his own wealth and alliances. The loyalty that had once bound the nation together was weakening, and whispers of rebellion spread through the land. The unity that had defined Israel under David was fading, and the fractures in the kingdom became more visible with each passing day. Solomon's son Rehoboam was set to inherit the throne, but he lacked the wisdom and discernment that had once characterized his father. Unlike Solomon, who had been guided by the prophet Nathan and other wise advisers, Rehoboam seemed unprepared for the challenges that awaited him. The people hoped that with a new king, there might be relief from the burdens that had been imposed under Solomon's reign. However, Rehoboam's leadership would only deepen the divisions within the kingdom, accelerating the fragmentation that had begun under his father. The prophecy given to Solomon about the division of his kingdom weighed heavily on his mind as his final days approached. God had warned that the kingdom would be torn apart, with 10 tribes given to a subordinate and only a small remnant left to the house of David. This prophecy loomed over Solomon as a reminder of the consequences of his disobedience. His alliances, once seen as symbols of peace and prosperity, had brought foreign gods into the heart of Israel, challenging the monotheistic faith that had set the nation apart. The spiritual erosion that followed left Israel vulnerable to both internal and external threats, and Solomon's legacy was now at risk of being overshadowed by the division that would follow. Despite his regrets, Solomon turned his heart back to God in his final days, seeking solace and forgiveness. His writings in Ecclesiastes reflected a man who had come full circle, returning to the truth he had known in his youth. "Remember your Creator in the days of your youth," he advised, a poignant reminder of the importance of maintaining one's faith throughout life. These words served as a final plea to his people and to future generations, encouraging them to place their trust in God rather than in the fleeting pursuits of wealth, power, and pleasure. When Solomon died after a 40-year reign, he left behind a kingdom at the peak of its wealth and influence, yet teetering on the edge of collapse. The grandeur of his achievements was undeniable, but the spiritual compromises he had made would haunt Israel for generations to come. His son Rehoboam ascended to the throne, inheriting not only the splendor of his father's accomplishments but also the divisions that had been sown throughout the nation. The people, weary of the burdens imposed by Solomon's rule, approached Rehoboam with a request for relief. They asked him to lighten the harsh labor and taxes that had been imposed to fund Solomon's projects, hoping that the new king would show compassion and understanding. Rehoboam, however, faced a choice that would determine the fate of Israel. He consulted with 2 groups of advisers, the elders who had served his father and the young men with whom he had grown up. The elders advised him to respond with kindness and to ease the people's burdens, suggesting that if he showed understanding, he would earn their loyalty. But the young men urged him to assert his authority, telling him to increase the burdens and show the people his strength. Rehoboam, seeking to prove himself as a strong ruler, chose to follow the advice of the young men. When he delivered his decision to the people, declaring that he would increase their burdens rather than lessen them, the response was immediate and fierce. The tribes of Israel, feeling betrayed and oppressed, rebelled against Rehoboam, and the kingdom was split in 2. The 10 northern tribes broke away, forming the kingdom of Israel under Jeroboam, while only the tribes of Judah and Benjamin remained loyal to Rehoboam in the south. The once united kingdom that David and Solomon had built was now divided, fulfilling the prophecy that God had given to Solomon. This division marked the beginning of a turbulent period in Israel's history, as the northern and southern kingdoms would experience cycles of conflict, idolatry, and eventual exile. The legacy of Solomon, once defined by wisdom and prosperity, was now a cautionary tale of how even the greatest leaders can fall when they turn away from God. In the centuries that followed, Solomon's story continued to resonate with the people of Israel. His writings in Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the Song of Songs remained central to Jewish teachings, offering wisdom and guidance to generations. His life served as both an inspiration and a warning, a complex legacy that reflected the highs and lows of human ambition, faith, and frailty. Even as the kingdom he had once ruled lay divided, Solomon's teachings reminded his people of the values that could lead them back to unity and righteousness. As we conclude this journey through Solomon's life, we are left with the lessons he learned and the wisdom he imparted. To seek God above all else, to live with humility, and to remember that true fulfillment can only be found in a life grounded in faith. Solomon's legacy, while marked by wisdom and wealth, also became a powerful reminder of the consequences of straying from a devoted life of faith. After his death, the people of Israel looked to his writings for guidance, seeking meaning in his words and the lessons hidden within his journey. His works, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the Song of Songs, survived as timeless pieces of wisdom, each reflecting different aspects of Solomon's experience and insights. Through these writings, Solomon offered counsel not only to the people of Israel but to future generations who would search for truth, understanding, and a deeper connection with God. The Book of Proverbs captured the heart of Solomon's teachings, filled with practical advice on how to live a righteous and fulfilling life. He spoke about the importance of humility, kindness, and respect for God's commandments. Proverbs like, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding," became cornerstones of his philosophy, urging his readers to rely on God's guidance rather than their own limited judgment. In this collection of sayings, Solomon shared lessons on family, work, and community, emphasizing the values that bind people together and lead to a life of harmony and purpose. Ecclesiastes, however, revealed a different side of Solomon, one marked by reflection and introspection. In this book, he explored the fleeting nature of life and the limitations of human understanding. "There is a time for everything, and a season for every activity under the heavens," he wrote, recognizing the ebb and flow of existence and the importance of accepting both joy and sorrow as part of God's plan. Ecclesiastes expressed Solomon's disillusionment with the pursuit of wealth, power, and pleasure, as he realized that these things, while desirable, could never truly satisfy the soul. His words served as a sobering reminder that human pursuits are ultimately a chasing after the wind if they are not grounded in a deeper faith and purpose. In the Song of Songs, Solomon's writing took on a poetic and romantic tone, celebrating the beauty of love and the bond between a man and a woman. This book, often interpreted as an allegory of God's love for his people, expressed Solomon's appreciation for the spiritual aspects of love and connection. The Song of Songs captured the passion and longing that define human relationships, drawing a parallel between earthly love and the divine love that God has for his creation. Through this work, Solomon reminded his readers that love, when pure and unselfish, is a reflection of the love God has for humanity. Despite the wisdom embedded in his writings, Solomon's story also served as a cautionary tale. The people of Israel learned from his life that wisdom alone is not enough to maintain a relationship with God. His compromises and alliances had introduced foreign influences into Israel, leading to the division of the kingdom and the spread of idolatry. The story of Solomon became a lesson in the importance of steadfast faith, showing that even the wisest of leaders can be led astray if they allow their hearts to drift from God's path. As the years passed, the divided kingdoms of Israel and Judah faced many challenges, each struggling to maintain their identity and faith in a world of competing gods and cultures. The kings who followed Solomon were faced with the difficult task of leading a people who had grown divided in their beliefs and practices. Some rulers sought to restore the worship of the one true God, while others continued to embrace the foreign gods that had entered Israel during Solomon's reign. The spiritual turmoil and political instability that marked this period were lasting reminders of the choices Solomon had made, choices that had set in motion a cycle of idolatry and conflict that would haunt Israel for generations. The northern kingdom, Israel, quickly descended into a pattern of rebellion and idolatry, often turning to foreign powers for support rather than relying on God. Kings like Jeroboam, who had taken control after the kingdom's division, established new centers of worship that deviated from traditional practices, leading the people further from their faith. In Judah, the southern kingdom, some kings attempted to restore the purity of worship and bring the people back to God, but the influence of foreign customs and gods was difficult to overcome. The divided kingdom was weakened by its internal struggles, making it vulnerable to attacks from surrounding nations. Over the centuries, the consequences of Solomon's divided heart echoed through the lives of his descendants and the fate of his people. The prophets, who emerged during this time, reminded Israel and Judah of their covenant with God, calling them to repentance and urging them to abandon the idols that had led them astray. Prophets like Elijah, Amos, and Hosea spoke out against the moral and spiritual decay that had taken root, warning the people of the consequences of turning away from God. They urged the kingdoms to remember the God of their fathers, who had delivered them from slavery and established them as a nation, and to turn back to him with a pure heart. Despite these warnings, the people of Israel and Judah continued to struggle with the legacy of Solomon's choices. The divided kingdom faced wars, invasions, and periods of exile, each event serving as a reminder of the covenant that had been broken. The Assyrian and Babylonian empires would eventually conquer the northern and southern kingdoms, leading the people into captivity and scattering them across foreign lands. Yet, even in exile, the memory of Solomon's wisdom and the teachings he left behind endured, offering hope and guidance to those who sought to remain faithful to God. In the generations that followed, the story of Solomon was retold and preserved, both as a celebration of wisdom and as a warning against the dangers of compromise. His writings continued to inspire those who valued wisdom and sought a deeper understanding of life and faith. Through his teachings, Solomon reminded his people that true wisdom lies in reverence for God and a life dedicated to his commandments. The lessons he imparted lived on, encouraging each generation to seek God's guidance and to live with humility, integrity, and devotion. Solomon's story is a powerful testament to the complexities of human nature, showing that even the greatest leaders are not immune to the temptations and struggles of life. His rise and fall illustrate the importance of a steadfast heart and the need to stay rooted in faith, even when faced with the allure of wealth, power, and worldly pleasures. Solomon's wisdom, while profound, ultimately served as a reminder that knowledge alone cannot fulfill the soul. Only a genuine relationship with God can bring lasting peace and purpose. Today, the legacy of Solomon lives on in the teachings that continue to influence believers around the world. His proverbs are quoted by those seeking guidance, his reflections in Ecclesiastes resonate with those searching for meaning, and the Song of Songs celebrates the beauty of love as a reflection of divine grace. Solomon's life, with all its triumphs and tribulations, offers valuable insights into the human journey, revealing the importance of staying true to one's faith and the dangers of letting worldly desires overshadow spiritual devotion. As we conclude this exploration of Solomon's life, let us take with us the wisdom he imparted and the lessons his story teaches. Though Solomon's story concluded with his passing, his life and legacy continued to shape the identity and spirituality of the people of Israel. As time passed, his wisdom, achievements, and eventual downfall became part of the collective memory of Israel, serving as both a beacon of inspiration and a warning of the dangers of drifting away from a life dedicated to God. His works, especially the Book of Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the Song of Songs, remain central to Jewish teachings, each book carrying profound truths that guided countless individuals across generations. The Book of Proverbs was treasured for its practical guidance on righteous living. These sayings, compiled by Solomon and possibly expanded upon by later scribes, formed a foundation of wisdom that transcended his reign. Proverbs provided a roadmap for navigating life's challenges, emphasizing virtues such as integrity, kindness, humility, and, above all, a deep respect for God. Proverbs like, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge," reinforce the idea that true understanding and wisdom stem from a reverence for God, a lesson Solomon himself had learned and sought to pass on. Ecclesiastes, with its more contemplative tone, delved into the struggles and questions that Solomon wrestled with in his later years. In this book, Solomon grappled with the meaning of life, the pursuit of pleasure, and the inevitable march of time. His conclusion was both somber and enlightening. Without God, all is ultimately meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Ecclesiastes resonated with those seeking answers to life's deeper questions, inviting them to look beyond earthly pursuits and to find fulfillment in a relationship with God. Through his reflections, Solomon offered a timeless reminder of the fleeting nature of wealth and status, encouraging future generations to seek what truly matters, a life grounded in faith and purpose. The Song of Songs, often seen as Solomon's most poetic work, celebrated the beauty of love and the connection between two souls. This lyrical and passionate book, sometimes interpreted as an allegory of God's love for his people, provided a profound insight into the emotional and spiritual aspects of human relationships. Through this book, Solomon captured the essence of pure and unselfish love, showing that such a bond reflects God's love for humanity. The Song of Songs reminded readers that love, when sincere and rooted in respect, is a gift from God that should be cherished and nurtured. Yet, as much as his writings inspired, Solomon's life also served as a cautionary tale, one that would be told for generations to come. His decisions to form alliances with foreign nations and to accommodate the religious practices of his wives introduced a wave of idolatry and spiritual compromise that would have long-lasting effects on Israel. The spiritual erosion that began in Solomon's palace eventually spread throughout the kingdom, creating divisions that would weaken Israel and Judah for centuries. The divided kingdom faced ongoing cycles of rebellion and idolatry, leading to foreign invasions and, eventually, exile. The prophets who emerged in the years following Solomon's reign spoke of Israel's covenant with God and the need for repentance. Figures like Elijah, Hosea, and Jeremiah called the people back to their faith, urging them to abandon the idols and return to the God of their ancestors. These prophets reminded Israel of the stories of their forefathers, including Solomon, whose wisdom had been unmatched but whose heart had been led astray. Through their words, the prophets emphasized that true devotion required obedience and a heart fully committed to God, regardless of wealth or worldly success. Despite the spiritual challenges Israel faced, Solomon's legacy endured. His teachings continued to inspire, guiding believers in their pursuit of wisdom and faith. His life story, with all its complexities, revealed the potential for greatness within each individual, as well as the pitfalls of allowing worldly desires to overshadow one's spiritual commitments. Solomon's life reminded his people that wisdom alone was not enough. True greatness came from a heart anchored in faith and a life devoted to serving God. Generations after Solomon's death, his story remained a central part of Israel's religious identity. His writings became sacred texts, valued not only for their wisdom but also for the insight they provided into the human experience. Solomon's Proverbs were recited by those seeking guidance in their daily lives, while Ecclesiastes offered comfort to those struggling with life's uncertainties. The Song of Songs was celebrated as a testament to the beauty of love, both human and divine. Each book served a unique purpose, touching the hearts of readers and reminding them of the enduring power of Solomon's teachings. As Israel faced hardships, invasions, and periods of exile, Solomon's wisdom continued to provide hope and direction. His story was a reminder that, even in times of adversity, one could find strength in faith and humility. His teachings became a foundation upon which the people of Israel could rebuild their lives, encouraging them to trust in God and to seek understanding through prayer and devotion. Through his writings, Solomon's voice lived on, echoing through the ages and speaking to those who yearned for guidance and purpose. In later centuries, Solomon's legacy would also influence other cultures and religions. His wisdom and insights transcended borders, inspiring thinkers, philosophers, and religious leaders across the ancient world. Solomon became a figure revered not only in Jewish tradition but also in Christianity and Islam, each of which recognized his profound wisdom and the moral lessons found in his story. His life, though marked by both brilliance and mistakes, stood as a testament to the complexities of human nature and the importance of a life dedicated to God. Solomon's teachings would continue to be studied and admired, forming a crucial part of the wisdom literature that shaped religious thought. His life, a mixture of triumph and tragedy, served as a reminder of the importance of humility and obedience to God. Though he had risen to the heights of wealth and power, his story revealed the dangers of pride and the need for spiritual discipline. Through his writings, Solomon called upon future generations to pursue wisdom, to cherish love, and to seek God's presence in all things. As we reflect on Solomon's journey, we see the powerful legacy he left behind, a legacy that reminds us of the potential within each of us to seek wisdom, to live with purpose, and to remain faithful to God. His story is one of growth, achievement, and the sobering realization of life's deeper truths. Though he was a king with unmatched riches and knowledge, Solomon ultimately found that true peace and fulfillment could only be attained through a life rooted in faith. His wisdom, preserved in his writings, continues to light the way for those who seek a closer relationship with God and a deeper understanding of life's mysteries. In our final look at Solomon's life, may we take with us the lessons he learned: to value wisdom, to live with humility, and to hold steadfast to our faith. As Solomon's life faded, his story became a powerful symbol, a complex legacy of wisdom, wealth, and caution. Though he had led Israel to unparalleled heights of prosperity, the spiritual compromises he made left lasting effects on the nation. The divided kingdom that followed Solomon's reign marked a period of deep political and spiritual struggle, setting a precedent that would challenge Israel and Judah for generations. After Solomon's death, his son Rehoboam ascended to the throne, facing a kingdom fractured by high taxes and labor demands that had been placed on the people. Rehoboam's decision to continue his father's heavy policies led to an immediate rebellion. The 10 northern tribes broke away, forming their own kingdom under Jeroboam, while only Judah and Benjamin remained loyal to Rehoboam in the south. This division, which God had foretold, marked the beginning of a turbulent era for the Israelites. With 2 separate kingdoms, Israel and Judah both struggled to maintain their faith and identity amidst the influences introduced during Solomon's reign. Some kings tried to bring the people back to the worship of the one true God, while others continued to allow idolatrous practices. The prophets, rising during these difficult times, reminded the people of God's commandments and the covenant that bound them. They warned of the consequences of idolatry, urging the nation to return to God wholeheartedly. Figures like Elijah, Hosea, and Jeremiah played pivotal roles, their messages echoing the need for repentance and loyalty to the God of Israel. Solomon's life, remembered for both his wisdom and his failings, served as a lesson. His writings continued to guide and inspire, while his story warned of the dangers of compromise and divided loyalties. Proverbs offered practical wisdom, Ecclesiastes explored life's deeper questions, and the Song of Songs celebrated love and devotion, each capturing different dimensions of Solomon's understanding. As Israel and Judah endured hardship and exile, the memory of Solomon's wisdom provided comfort and insight. His teachings transcended his own flaws, reminding people to seek a life grounded in faith and integrity. Despite the division that marred his legacy, Solomon's wisdom continued to influence future generations, highlighting the importance of a steadfast heart and the pursuit of true understanding. In the final chapter of Solomon's story, we see a king whose life, though marked by grandeur, serves as a powerful reminder that wisdom alone is not enough. Only through faith and devotion can one find lasting peace. Solomon's journey calls us to remember that our true legacy lies in a life rooted in God's love and commandments. In reflecting on Solomon's life, we see a legacy filled with both triumph and caution. His wisdom, wealth, and accomplishments were unmatched, yet his compromises left a profound impact on Israel. Solomon's story endures as a reminder that even the greatest wisdom can falter without a heart fully committed to God. His teachings live on, offering guidance to those seeking understanding. Proverbs continues to inspire with its practical insights on life and faith. Ecclesiastes speaks to those questioning life's meaning, urging them to find purpose in God. The Song of Songs celebrates love's purity, reflecting divine affection. Yet Solomon's life also serves as a solemn lesson. His divided heart led to a divided kingdom, showing that spiritual strength is as crucial as wisdom. The prophets who followed Solomon's time called Israel and Judah to return to God, urging faithfulness above all. Despite the challenges, Solomon's writings became cornerstones of wisdom, showing future generations the importance of a life grounded in faith. Solomon's journey calls us to seek more than wealth or knowledge, to seek a life aligned with God's will. His story is a testament to the complexities of human ambition and faith, reminding us that true greatness is found not in earthly achievements, but in unwavering devotion to God. Let his life be a guide, encouraging us to build a legacy of faith, love, and wisdom that transcends the challenges of this world.